So as Keith said, I'll be talking a little bit about how we would define success in Alberta potentially for the rehab program, as well as some of the activities that we've been doing over the last year. And the bio picture, I think, is the only gratuitous fish picture I have in this, unlike last year. Since the incursion in 2005, about a quarter of Alberta's pine forests have been affected to some degree by mountain pine beetle. That could be an aviary polygon with five hit trees, or it could be a polygon with 70% mortality. So it's kind of a loose number, but about 1.5 million hectares have been affected to some degree. And as a result of that dead and dying timber out there, companies have been harvesting as largely as quick as they can to deal with that dead and dying material. But a lot of it is in areas that are really inaccessible. As time progresses, that asset deteriorates. You see, as it becomes gray and it becomes checked, everything else, the ability to harvest that economically diminishes fairly rapidly. So what we have is a building inventory of unsalvageable stands, and that's really the impetus for the development of the rehab program. As we know, forests have been dealing with disturbance for millennia, as Bruce Larson eloquently described this morning. And they will return to some state. And with mountain pine beetle, some of the work out of BC, it's showing 20-25 years before you have some kind of recovery. And in Alberta, we don't really know what that'll look like for mountain pine beetle. It will come back to something, but will it be what we want? And again, will it? And as Bruce said before, it's that time scale. Is it going to get back to what we want in a quick enough manner? Especially as if there's vital ecosystem services. A specific value that we have that we hold dear, is it going to recover quick enough to do something? If not, then we might have to step in and do some rehab activities. So one of the first things is how we define success. I find this a bit difficult, and I'll be kind of expounding on why. Really, defining success is meeting objectives. It's the objectives that you said are the difficult part in this type of scenario. This was discussed by Gillian and Bruce Larson before, but what do you want from your future forest? It's that desired future forest that licensees deal with on their FMPs. And with that, we have changing societal values. What might be desired now might not be what future generations desire. So it's and without a crystal ball, I mean, I guess we have to go with the values that we have now, but we really don't know what will be important down the road, what future suite of goods and services will be desired. Within Forest Management Branch, we've determined that the overarching objective for the rehab program, this is on a landscape level, a large 3,000 or 30,000 foot level, is the continued production of ecosystem goods and services in pine-dominated stands heavily impacted by mountain pine beetle. That's a very vague statement. There's lots into that, as Gillian discussed. And those ecosystem goods and services, that's biodiversity, that's water quality and quantity, that's aquatic habitat for Athabascan rainbow trout, west slope cutthroats, bull trout, all those things, wildlife habitat. There's all kinds of things that are going to go into that. And as well as fiber production is an important output. And this objective that provides a landscape level framework to build for us to build the program and move forward. But that's a very high level. And what we really need to do is in the next step of evolution of the program is to create those specific stand and forest level objectives that will then allow us to define success on a project that we actually tackle. And because again, success depends on what your objective is. And currently, we can't define those, or we can't create those specific objectives and thus define what success looks like, because there's certain baseline key information pieces that we really don't have that would allow us to start doing that. And that's kind of driven, that need has driven what the branch and what I've been up to in the last year, is to create some of that, to get some of that baseline information that we need to move forward with this meaningfully. The four areas of program development that we have as priority for this past year and moving forward are fourfold. how many dead trees do we have and where are they? What happens to stand development if we do nothing? So I guess is rehab even required? That's a critical baseline goalpost that we need to establish. What goods and services are actually important? Where are they on the landscape? Have they been impacted? And are they at risk? Do we know what thresholds? Do we know how resilient those goods and services are? And are they actually impacted by the level of mountain pine beetle that's actually on the landscape? And 4 is kind of a culmination of those first 3 is developing a stand selection criteria to allow us to build a strategic approach to rehabbing stands and selecting those stands that we want to actually do some activities in. And that's a critical one, and I think that goes to what Gord was asking before, and I'll expand on that. The first part of baseline is how many dead trees are out there, and where are they? And really, to be strategic on where you choose to do things, you really have to have this basic piece of information. Without this, it's really you can't strategically do anything with your program. You have to have this information. And with that in mind, an image classification project was initiated last June. So that's when the ball got rolling, because the extent of the mountain pine beetle right now is not currently known, and I'll expand on that in a little bit here. And again, it's strategic information that's vital to the program. This map, and I think a few people have shown it so far. This area here is what was aerial surveyed in 2013, and with a shift in mountain pine beetle management focus and strategy, this area here has not been continually aerial surveyed. We started in 2006, and a lot of that was done in the big in-flight in 2006. We aerial surveyed all of that. And as priorities shifted, we moved away from continually aerial surveying that and then into other areas. So what we have is this spot, these yellowy orange dots down here were aerial surveyed in 2013, and they've been continuously aerial surveyed. They've always been in the leading edge since the first incursion in 2005 was back out here, but since 2006 they've been aerial surveyed ever since. But what we have is this gap. So what I wanted to do is find out how much cumulative death we have. That's gray attack, red attack, everything. What's happened since the first incursion? So what I did is I went through and kind of drew polygons based on where we knew that there was impact, based on old aerial surveys, some projections, some of the imagery that we had, and using AVI and or phase 3 imagery, like P8 only has phase 3. So what we did is I looked at where there's pine component, and I used 20% for pine, and then no continuous inventory. So these squares, these are all townships that we have that I wanted to classify. The red being imagery that we already had. There's about 77 townships of imagery that we already had, and the purple being images that we don't have. A lot of that's old stuff. It's some of it's from the late 90s. It's very high, it's very poor resolution, all those kind of things. So that kind of drove the program. There's 329 new townships that I wanted to get flown and then classified. So that kind of drove the program. So step 1, image acquisition. What we're looking for is 30 centimeter resolution, so very, very high resolution imagery. And we had 8-bit and 16-bit done. It doesn't turn out very well here. There's lots of, it's very good imagery. You can zoom right down to individual trees almost. And there's a fair bit of mortality in various areas. So step 2 was the actual image classification. So this project is ongoing. We hope to have this done. Actually, contractually, it has to be done by the end of May. So it will get done. And we're classifying. I don't know if you guys can see these polygons, but it's the way they've done it is this is a consultant out of Victoria that's been doing this, and they're using different techniques. I won't even begin to understand what they are. But it's down to the individual tree crown for mortality. And they're getting gray, and we thought maybe gray might be difficult, but it's not. Gray's just as easy as the reds are, which was very good news for us. And we had done a little bit of this work prior, I think up in the Peace Country we did smaller scale projects on some of this image classification, so we knew it could be done. What else can I say? There was some of the images that were collected. Some of the townships weren't able to get collected this summer because we had that mid-September snowstorm that kind of wreaked havoc with our plans. And there's a number that didn't get done, but the vast majority did get done, which is good. Yeah, and I've QC'd a lot of this, and we have pretty tight specs for what I would call mountain pine beetle and what they've called mountain pine beetle using the imagery, and they're meeting the specs well. So it's actually very good work. I thought the specs were almost too tight to make, but they've met them. And clearly there's other benefits besides rehab planning. Historical record of beetle spread, timber supply analysis. Some of these stands that are significantly dead are no longer producing. Seed collection plans. So for companies and for government, what are priorities if a lot of these stands are dead in a specific strata? Then we have to do something seed collection wise. And fire risk assessments is also a big one. The fire guys don't really know what's out there for different fuel inventories. Is it red? Is it gray? Is it falling down? Because at about year 10, those trees start to fall down, and especially like year 10 through 15, and the fire fuel loads become very different. So this is something that's desired for a lot of groups. So the second priority is what happens if we do nothing. If we walk away from these stands, what happens? And that's really a very important goalpost. Because if they're going to recover well and continue to produce goods and services, really, why do anything? So basal area recovery, recruitment, plant communities, fall down rates, all these things that are, and we know based on the level of mortality in the stand, they'll be very different, and depending on natural subregions. And Ellen McDonald talked about that yesterday, and so did Sharon Meredith, about how definitely you're seeing different results from different ecosites, which is predictable. So some of the work to answer this question, in 2007, a GOA and academic panel got together and looked at the pine, at different pine leading species or strata, and tried to figure out in various ecosites on where those would turn out. It was a guess based on, not a guess, that's too coarse of a word, a very educated look at what the stands might look like, but it still needs to be tested. And Marty's done some work also on a big poster from last year, if you guys remember that one, on what some of these stands would look like, specific to grizzly bear and caribou as well, based on some literature that he's done, literature review that he's done. So we've got a hand. We think we have an understanding of what might happen, but we need to be this needs to be tested. And the 3 talks yesterday, those ones there, which are ongoing to try to answer this question as well. So there's lots of work going on with this. I'd like to see more long-term data, and Sharon talked about this in her talk as well, that a PSP network specific to pine-dominant stands with significant rates of mortality is something that is highly desired, to find out what these stands do. And that would be very, very good baseline information for us. Currently, what we have in the province for industrial permanent sample plots and the government ones, there's only about 60 that meet these criteria, and the criteria I've said are 50% pine component in the canopy and at least 20% mortality in those stands without any video control. So that's kind of what I'm looking at for something that would actually significantly impact the stand. And there's only about 60 that we have existing, and statistically that's not enough to drive anything as far as growth curves or to actually understand statistically what's going on with these stands. Talking with Sean Ming Wang, we're looking at 30 per natural submarine is what he's looking at for would be an adequate sample size. So that's what we've been looking at. I've done a lot of work looking through imagery, looking for prospective sites that we could put these in that would allow a significant or a suitable buffer, those kind of things, and funding sources are being explored. And Sharon talked about that yesterday. Looking for FGRO to actually submit a proposal to initiate this work. The third priority is impact to ecosystem goods and services, and this is an ongoing, dynamic, adaptive process. So what are the goods and services at risk due to mountain pine beetle pine killed by MPB? So we're working on this now. This is a collaborative thing that's going to have to be done with researchers, our own ecologists, that kind of thing. We're starting to get a handle on which ones to look at and which ones we perhaps don't. But there's a lot more risk in this. And I think Jillian's somebody I'm definitely going to have to talk to. The next step is, have they been affected? And really, you need the mountain pine beetle classification data to actually find out at what level have these things been actually impacted. And will they be impacted? So what are the tolerances? Like I said before, there's each of those goods and services probably have a certain tolerance. They can withstand a fair bit of beetle mortality before they're actually compromised. But that's something where there's some of these are very unknown. We clearly don't know what some of these tolerances are. And the fourth thing is, again, how do we choose stands for rehab? How can we be strategic? And what we'd like to do is consolidate all this data, like the stand projections, like what these stands might turn out to be, mortality data, all the values at risk, that kind of thing, and actually bring them together into a decision support tool that would actually help us strategically look at what stands are actually the highest priority to meet multiple objectives, as far as trying to meet as many of those ecological goods and services as possible, not just simply timber, or not just simply one thing over the other. We want to have multiple benefits from this. One gratuitous fish picture. So in the stand selection criteria, there's a lot of data layers that I've brought in so far, and working with Fish and Wildlife people, AER as far as soil erodibility, Axel as far as equivalent clear cut calculations, fish habitat, grizzly bear habitat. There's all kinds of inputs that would go into this layer, as well as stand criteria. What is the ecosite? What is the polygon size? What kind of mortality do you have in the stand? What is the stand composition? All these kind of different things that would go into this tool. But I think this is the only really good way to actually consolidate all the information we have and actually come up with some strategic plans to meet those objectives. And this is a very adaptive thing that as different information comes into play, we can fire them into this and come up with different processes. So, in summary, the program is continually evolving, and this will be for a long time. As more and more information comes to the fore, we'll have to bring it in and adapt. We clearly don't know everything. We can't know everything, but hopefully, as we progress, this group will gain more and more knowledge on what has to go into this system. Ecosystem goods and services maintenance is the overarching goal that we're basing this program on. Again, defining success is a work in progress. Currently, we don't know because we're missing a lot of information on how we set these stand level and forest level objectives. What we want to do is come up with a strategic plan to come up with good candidate stands that we want to actually do some activities in, and surround them with good science on what we do, and then ultimately how we treat them, which is some of the stuff that Beyond Beetle is looking at, and other FRI projects. And again, we're not waiting for perfect answers. We have to be adaptable. We have to move forward with this, and we'll adapt as we go with better information.